Hello everyone! Welcome to Literature Revision with Mr. Johnston. Today, we're going to be looking at Chapter 3 of Jekyll and Hyde. In this extract, we meet Jekyll for the first time. This video is going to answer the following questions. What makes Jekyll so mysterious? Why does Stevenson only introduce Jekyll in Chapter 3? Why does the reader feel conflicting emotions towards Jekyll? And what is Stevenson demonstrating about human nature through Jekyll's character? Before we begin, you may be interested in downloading my free resource for this extract. Click a link in the description box below to download this document for free. It comes complete with writing tables for taking notes, short writing tasks, and exemplar paragraphs. Let's now begin by summarizing Chapter 3. In this chapter, Utterson attends a dinner party at Jekyll's house. After this dinner, Utterson questions Jekyll about his will. Now you may remember that Utterson has been very concerned about this document. Jekyll's will says that all of his property will pass into the hands of Edward Hyde if Jekyll dies or disappears. Utterson believes that Hyde could be blackmailing Jekyll. But Jekyll does not want to talk about his will with Utterson. He finds this topic distasteful. Jekyll changes the topic and discusses how he has fallen out with Dr. Lanyon. Dr. Lanyon apparently believes that Jekyll's interests were scientific heresies. Utterson refuses to change the topic of conversation. He tells Jekyll that he has now learned about Mr. Hyde. Utterson has indeed recently learned about Hyde's villainous character. In Chapter 1, he learned that Hyde trampled over the young girl. In Chapter 2, Utterson met Hyde for himself, and was repulsed by Hyde's evil. Jekyll is disturbed that Utterson has learnt about Hyde. But Jekyll still reassures Utterson. He says that he can be rid of Hyde whenever he wishes. Jekyll finishes the conversation with a vague statement. He says that he has great interest in Hyde and makes Utterson promise that he will look after Hyde when Jekyll is gone. If you would like to skip the reading of this extract, jump to 9 minutes 11 seconds. A fortnight later, by excellent good fortune, the doctor gave one of his pleasant dinners to some 5 or 6 old cronies, all intelligent, reputable men, and all judges of good wine. And Mr. Utterson so contrived that he remained behind after the others had departed. This was no new arrangement, but a thing that had befallen many scores of times. Where Utterson was liked, he was liked well. Hosts loved to detain the dry lawyer, when the light-hearted and the loose-tongued had already their foot on the threshold. They liked to sit a while in his unobtrusive company, practising for solitude, sobering their minds in the man's rich silence after the expense and strain of gaiety. To this rule, Dr. Jekyll was no exception, and as he now sat on the opposite side of the fire, a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of 50, with something of a slyish cast perhaps, but every mark of capacity and kindness, you could see by his looks that he cherished for Mr. Utterson a sincere and warm affection. "I have been wanting to speak to you, Jekyll," began the latter. "You know that will of yours?" A close observer might have gathered that the topic was distasteful, but the doctor carried it off gaily. "My poor Utterson," said he, "you are unfortunate in such a client. I never saw a man so distressed as you were by my will, unless it were that hide-bound pedant Lanyon, at what he called my scientific heresies. Oh, I know, he's a good fellow, you needn't frown, an excellent fellow, and I always mean to see more of him, but a hide-bound pedant for all that, an ignorant, blatant pedant. I was never more disappointed in any man than Lanyon." You know I never approved of it, pursued Utterson, ruthlessly disregarding the fresh topic. My will? Yes, certainly, I know that, said the doctor, a trifle sharply. You have told me so. Well, I tell you so again, continued the lawyer. I have been learning something of young Hyde. The large handsome face of Dr. Jekyll grew pale to the very lips, and there came a blackness about his eyes. I do not care to hear more, said he. This is a matter I thought we had agreed to drop. What I heard was abominable, said Utterson. It can make no change. You do not understand my position, returned the doctor, with a certain incoherency of manner. I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking. Jekyll, said Utterson, you know me. I am a man to be trusted. Make a clean breast of this in confidence, and I make no doubt I can get you out of it. My good Utterson, said the doctor, this is very good of you. This is downright good of you. And I cannot find words to thank you in. I believe you fully. I would trust you before any man alive. Aye, before myself, if I could make the choice. But indeed, it isn't what you fancy. It's not so bad as that. And just to put your good heart at rest, I will tell you one thing. The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde. I give you my word upon that, and I thank you again and again. And I will just add one little word, Utterson, that I'm sure you'll take in good part. This is a private matter, and I beg of you to let it sleep. Utterson reflected a little, looking in the fire. I have no doubt you are perfectly right, he said at last, getting to his feet. Well, but since we have touched upon this business, and for the last time, I hope, continued the doctor, there is one point I should like you to understand. I have really a very great interest in poor Hyde. I know you have seen him. He told me so. And I fear he was rude. But I do sincerely take a very great interest in that young man. And if I am taken away, Utterson, I wish you to promise me that you will bear with him and get his rights for him. I think you would, if you knew all. And it would be a weight off my mind if you would promise. I can't pretend that I shall ever like him, said the lawyer. I don't ask that, pleaded Jekyll, laying his hand upon the other's arm. I only ask for justice. I only ask you to help him for my sake when I am no longer here. Utterson heaved an irrepressible sigh. Well, said he, I promise. We're now going to analyse this extract. This video is going to answer the following question. How does Stevenson present Jekyll in this extract? Let's begin with our first idea. To the outside world, Jekyll appears to be a respectable gentleman. This extract begins with a description of Jekyll's friends. Now, the friends that you choose reveal a great deal about your character. So we can tell a lot about Jekyll and Jekyll's reputation just by looking at his social circle. Let's see how Jekyll's friends are described. Jekyll's friends are described as intelligent and reputable men who are judges of good wine. Now, wine in these days was the drink of the Victorian upper classes. This drink was mainly consumed by people who were very rich. Now, the fact that Jekyll's friends are described as reputable suggests that these are respectable men who have won a good reputation for themselves. In sum, Stevenson is demonstrating that Jekyll belongs to an elite social group of important gentlemen. Our positive impression of Jekyll's character is further reinforced by his handsome looks. Even though he is 50 years old, Jekyll is smooth-faced. This description suggests that Jekyll's face is unblemished. He has no scars and few wrinkles. His skin isn't rough, it is smooth, just like the face of a younger man. Jekyll seems to have a somewhat youthful appearance for his age. This description of Jekyll's unblemished skin also seems to suggest that he has an innocent character. It looks like Jekyll has gone through life uncorrupted by the world. Jekyll's smooth, unblemished face seems to be an outward sign of an inward innocence. Now let's stop and think about the structure of this opening section of a novel for a second. In chapter 2, the reader meets Mr. Hyde. And now, in chapter 3, the reader is introduced to Dr. Jekyll. So Stevenson introduces these two characters in 2 consecutive chapters. Why does he do this? Well, it seems that Stevenson is wanting the reader to make a comparison between Dr. Jekyll's character and Mr. Hyde's character. Upon this first appearance, Jekyll seems to be a complete contrast to Hyde. Whereas Jekyll is a sophisticated gentleman, Hyde is a violent criminal. Whereas Jekyll is handsome, respectable and large, Hyde is ugly, uncivilized and dwarfish. Whereas Jekyll belongs to London's upper class, Hyde belongs to London's corrupt underworld. But Stevenson hints that there may not be such a contrast between these two characters as one might initially think. In this extract, Stevenson writes that Jekyll possesses something of a slyish cast, perhaps. Such a description, which describes Jekyll as slyish, hints that there is something deceitful and potentially malicious about Jekyll. But it's worth noticing the odd language that Stevenson uses here. Listen again. He writes that there is something of a slyish cast, perhaps. Stevenson is using tentative language here. He twice qualifies this description through the words something and perhaps. This vague language ensures that the sly, darker dimension of Jekyll's character is kept obscure and vague. Jekyll's evil lies well under the surface of his respectable facade. Jekyll appears to be a respectable gentleman, but Stevenson is planting a doubt in the reader's head about this initial impression. Jekyll may not be as innocent and impressive as he appears. And that brings us to the end of our first point. To the outside world, Jekyll appears to be a respectable gentleman. Let's now go on to our second idea. Stevenson creates suspicion around Jekyll's relationship with Hyde. Jekyll dislikes talking about his will. When Utterson first begins discussing this topic, Jekyll's body language demonstrates that he finds the conversation distasteful. This description marks a tonal shift in the extract. A tonal shift is when the mood or atmosphere of an extract suddenly changes. Stevenson began this extract by describing Jekyll's dinner party and friends. You can imagine that the evening has been relaxed and light-hearted up until now. Jekyll has enjoyed his friends' company. But as soon as Utterson mentions Jekyll's will, the atmosphere changes and the tension rises. Have you ever raised a sensitive topic with someone and felt the conversation become very awkward? Well, that is exactly what happens here. It is evident that Jekyll dislikes discussing both his will and Mr. Hyde, but we're not quite sure why. Jekyll now changes the conversation topic to Dr. Lanyon. He talks about how he has fallen out with Lanyon over his research. This conversation topic has nothing to do with Jekyll's will. Jekyll is deliberately trying to steer the conversation away from Mr. Hyde. But Utterson refuses to change the conversation topic. Jekyll now begins talking a trifle sharply. Jekyll is irritated by the lawyer's persistence. He is now becoming defensive and increasingly angry. Perhaps he feels threatened by Utterson's questioning. We thus get a sense that Jekyll is desperately trying to protect some secret from Utterson. But again, we're not sure what the secret might be. All we know is that it has something to do with Mr. Hyde. When Utterson announces that he has learnt about Mr. Hyde, Jekyll turns pale to the very lips. Jekyll seems nervous and disturbed by Utterson's words. Now, why is Jekyll worried? Well, we can guess it's because Jekyll is himself aware of Hyde's crimes. Jekyll knows about Hyde's villainous nature. Jekyll is now unhappy that Utterson has also learnt about Hyde's crimes. Such a reaction may cause us to regard Jekyll with some suspicion. It seems that Jekyll may somehow be connected to Hyde's criminal activity. Jekyll may appear to be a respectable gentleman, but the nervous unease that he displays throughout this conversation arouses our distrust of this character. Jekyll's refusal to openly discuss the nature of his relationship with Hyde suggests that he holds some dark secrets. And that brings us to the end of our second point. Stevenson creates suspicion around Jekyll's relationship with Hyde. Let's now go on to our third and final idea. Stevenson presents Jekyll as a troubled character. Jekyll displays an odd, nervous manner throughout his conversation with Utterson. He talks about his situation with a certain incoherency of manner. Now, this vague language is exemplified in the following sentence. I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. Take a look at the various parts of this sentence. As you can see, this sentence is very broken. I'm going to read it again, listen for the pauses, and think about what this speech pattern reflects about Jekyll. I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. As you can see, Jekyll's speech sounds very broken here. He seems to be hesitating with every word that he says. This speech pattern seems to reflect Jekyll's nervous, nearly feverish manner. Jekyll now seems desperately inarticulate and troubled. Now we can ask ourselves this question. Why is Jekyll so nervous? Well, we sense that Jekyll is experiencing an inner conflict throughout this conversation. He is torn between two different desires. On one hand, it is likely that Jekyll would like to reveal his secrets to Utterson. He may already feel great guilt for Hyde's crimes. Jekyll also may feel increasingly isolated because of his double life. He may desperately want to reveal everything to his friend. On the other hand, Jekyll also wants to guard his secrets. And so, in the end, Jekyll does not reveal the true nature of his relationship with Hyde. He keeps the secret hidden from his friend Utterson. Now, this leads us to our next question. Why doesn't Jekyll tell Utterson the truth about Hyde? Well, we get an answer to this in chapter 10. In his confession, Jekyll reveals that he enjoyed becoming Hyde. As Hyde, Jekyll could enjoy all sorts of immoral pleasures without any fear of damaging his reputation. He could take part in all sorts of sin and depravity, while still retaining his status as a respectable gentleman. Jekyll therefore does not want to reveal the truth about Hyde to Utterson. He does not want to ruin the double life that he is enjoying so much. Jekyll next finishes the conversation with some worrying words. Jekyll says to Utterson, "I only ask for justice. I only ask you to help him for my sake, when I am no longer here." Now let's zoom into this phrase, "when I am no longer here." This phrase sounds rather strange. It's firstly an example of vague language. It's not completely clear what Jekyll is talking about here. But it does sound rather sinister. It seems that this phrase is a euphemism for Jekyll's death or disappearance. It seems that Jekyll is already anticipating this event. He is already expecting his life to end tragically. Such words create a foreboding mood at the end of the chapter. These words also foreshadow Jekyll's tragic demise at the end of the novel. This is our first hint that our narrative will end very badly for Utterson's friend. The end of this chapter thus changes our view of Dr. Jekyll. Even though Jekyll seems very impressive on the surface, this appearance is deceiving. He might be intelligent, handsome, and wealthy, but Jekyll is in fact a very troubled character. He is a frightened soul trapped in a web of secrets and deceit. And that brings us to the end of our final point. Stevenson presents Jekyll as a troubled character. Let's now read the 3 ideas of this video one more time. Number 1, to the outside world, Jekyll appears to be a respectable gentleman. Number 2, Stevenson creates suspicion around Jekyll's relationship with Hyde. And number 3, Stevenson presents Jekyll as a troubled character. Let me now present my final thoughts on this extract. Chapter 3 is a significant moment in our novel, because it's the first time that Stevenson introduces Dr. Jekyll. Up until now, we are only given small bits of information about this character, but we have not met Jekyll himself. Stevenson thus makes this character seem obscure and mysterious to the reader. Now in chapter 3, we finally meet Jekyll, but Jekyll remains mysterious and obscure to the reader. If anything, this chapter raises more questions than answers about this character. Jekyll seems impressive. He is wealthy, handsome, and evidently intelligent. The friends who attend his dinner party bear testimony to Jekyll's status as a member of London's elite. Yet, even at this point in the novel, Jekyll seems morally dubious. Stevenson hints that this character is not as respectable as he may initially appear. His relationship with Hyde seems particularly ominous. Yet, the author keeps this darker aspect of Jekyll's character largely hidden to the reader. The mystery around Jekyll's character is thickened by the fact that he seems greatly troubled. Jekyll is nervous and hesitant throughout his conversation with Utterson. It seems that this character has found himself in a desperate situation, but again, Stevenson does not reveal what the situation actually is. So Jekyll is an ambiguous character. Upon reading this chapter, we may not know what we think about this gentleman. The reader is likely to feel a combination of conflicting emotions. On one hand, we feel suspicion of Jekyll. We do not know why he is so secretive about his relationship with Hyde. There also seems to be something slyish and morally dubious about this gentleman. His respectable appearance seems to be something of a facade. Yet, at the same time, we also pity Jekyll. He seems to be a moral and accomplished man who has found himself in a terrible situation. Jekyll seems nervous and troubled throughout this conversation. He is anticipating his disappearance as if it is a certainty. It seems, even in chapter 3, that this character is doomed. It is fitting that we should feel these conflicting emotions towards Jekyll, for, through this character, Stevenson is exploring a human condition in all its complexity and contradictions. Through Jekyll, we understand that no man is completely good nor completely evil. They are in fact a bewildering combination of both. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. If you would like to learn more about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, click the links to my other videos on this novel above. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I will be releasing more videos on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde across the coming weeks and months. But for now, all the best.